Hi everyone and welcome to this new speed build in The Sims 4, and today I'm building an art center for my Sims 4 series that follows the Baker family, because in that series one of the Sim is an artist and I really feel like I haven't been focusing on that Sim as much as I should have, and I think it's because he doesn't really have a place to go to practice his passion, which is painting. And of course I know that there are museums in the game and that there is also the art center in San Myshuno, but the museums aren't that much fun, to be honest, and that series is kind of a legacy, and right now we're focusing on the Get to Work expansion pack, and even though I don't mind to go to the worlds that were introduced in other expansion packs, I don't necessarily want to have to go to the world that is not really connected to the pack I'm currently focusing on. So I thought that I could build an art center in New Crest for Lee, who is the Sim who's the painter in my Sims 4 series, for him to go to and practice his painting skill at while being surrounded by other artistic Sims. And usually though, I think I'm not really good at building community lots, and if you check out my channel you won't probably find many. But this time around I took inspiration from the art school that I went to right after high school, and I had that idea after editing the last part of that series, and when I realized that I hadn't been focusing on Lee as much as I had on the other Sims of that series, and one of the main reasons was that he doesn't have a career where I can follow him into work with. So that got me thinking, and I thought that I could build a place where we could kind of go to work with him, with other Sims around to socialize with and do all of the stuff that you can do in the other get-to-work careers, just without the goals basically. And I thought about that art school that I went to because we had teachers that worked there all the time, but there were also artists that came for a few weeks, gave classes on the subjects they excelled at, and there was this rotation in a way. Every few weeks someone new would come in and so on and so forth, and I thought that Lee could either be one of the teachers that always worked there and talked to people who came to the school, taught them maybe a few things, or that he could be someone that just comes occasionally and gives just a couple classes at a time. And with the art center lot type, you have some Sims that come with this artist type of outfit, you know. They have a t-shirt that has a lot of paint on it and a beret, and these Sims would be the artists that come and give classes just occasionally, or they could be just other teachers that could be working alongside with Lee. So basically, I started creating my own artist or kind of painter active career. So that art school was divided in two buildings. You had on the left wing, as I'd like to see it, you had the left wing where you had on the ground level the pottery and sculpture room, and on the first level, just above the pottery and sculpture room, you had the photography and graphic design classroom. And in the right wing, you had on the ground level the lectures room, kind of like an auditorium, but also classrooms for children. And on the first level, just above these rooms once again, you had the classrooms that were dedicated to the people who signed up for an entire year there. So the room that I spent the most time in with other people who had signed up in the same program as I did. And just across our room, in a way, you had another classroom where we did some still life paintings and drawings, but also where we had classes where we painted people, and usually naked people. And I tried to recreate all of that in that build. Although, since we don't have any pottery type of activity, at least for now in the game, hopefully soon, I turned the pottery room into a woodworking room, and I also turned the auditorium into a flower arranging room, and I also added another room just across it that became the music room, although I left the children's classroom just the way it was. And I did all those changes because of the art center lot type requirements, and I also had to add a bar that I placed upstairs, and rather than having two painting rooms, I decided to have only one painting classroom, and the room just across it became kind of a lounge area with a mini fridge and a couch, just like in the active careers that came with Get to Work, where you have the kitchen and everything, just in case Lee ever came to work here. This way he has everything he needs to spend the day there. Also, I remember that in that art school we had a third level where we had our art history classes, and there was another room where we had some knitting and stuff to do, and it felt as if we were in an attic, I remember. But when we'll get the knitting stuff back, you know, the one that the community is currently voting for, maybe another room could be added for Sims who would like to experiment with knitting. And I really had a lot of fun building this art center, and I'm also really happy with how easily it came together. The one thing that I really love about this build though is the glass hallway that links the two buildings together upstairs. That was something that was in the art school, and it was really cool to walk across it, and that was a feature that I really wanted to have in this build. So as you can see, this build is quite modern looking, although the art school that I took inspiration from was a mix of both modern and old, like very old style. I don't even know how old the main building was. All I know is that it was situated in an historic area of the town, and when you looked at pictures from even before the early 1900s, you could see those buildings and the streets that were just next to the school, so I'd say this building was pretty old, and they had basically renovated the buildings in which the classes were, but they also added this modern extension with the glass hallway and the entrance area. And I think the photography and graphic design classroom was also a modern addition to the main building. And I really liked this mix of both styles. But here I didn't try to recreate that because next to the art school there was a music school, and on the other side next to the art school you had a library, and behind them you had shops and restaurants, and honestly all those buildings were just big puzzles when it came to the floor plan. So I just took the modern part of the build and adapted it to suit the Sims and the style I wanted to go with, and tried to simplify my life in a way. And in my Sims 4 series also, just across the street, I have placed a vet clinic that I have built a while ago, and I already had this idea of modern renovation because the idea of that vet clinic was that it was an old barn that was renovated into a vet clinic with a very cubic and modern addition to it, so I tried to keep that in mind when I built the art center to try and stay within the same style in this neighborhood. Also, I cut most of the footage when I was working on the landscaping because I really didn't know what to do, and landscaping is really not something that I think I'm really good at for now. And while working on the build, I came back to doing the landscaping I think like 5 times or so, just to redo everything, and in the end, I just placed a couple trees around the build, just to help it blend in with the neighborhood, so I thought it wasn't going to be the most interesting thing to watch. Plus, it took me I think 4 hours or so to work on this build, which is way longer than what it usually takes me to build something, but yet again, the building in itself was way bigger than what I usually work with. And that made it so that the final sped up footage was like 40 minutes long, so by removing the landscaping part of the video, I think it ended up being 10 minutes shorter, which is way less impressive when you have to do a voiceover over a final footage. But now I'm moving on to the interior of the build, although I have pretty much already finished doing the floor plan, which is something I like to get out of the way rather soon when building. This way, as I'm still working with the exterior of the build, I can start thinking about how I'm going to furnish the interior of the build. And here, when it came to the color themes I went with inside, I stayed very simple and used that concrete white wall that looks like it has some white bricks on it, because that was the closest wall type that was in the art school I took inspiration for this build, and every wall was white at the beginning of the year. All the walls were empty, but by the end of the year, you would see paintings and drawings that students had worked on and hung up on the walls everywhere, and you could also see some sculptures here and there in the school, and that's something that I tried to show in this build as well. And I'm thinking that maybe rather than getting rid of the paintings that random townies have done on this lot, I could just go into build mode and hang them up all around the place as if Sims really attended this school in a way and painted something here. Now I'm figuring out the flooring that I want to go with, and I placed concrete in most of the place except the classrooms where I put wood flooring because that was the flooring that we had in the art school. And in the glass hallway I put metallic flooring that came I think with Get to Work because once again that was what we had in the art school. And now I'm furnishing the entrance area where I put some counters with a computer on it as if it was the reception. And I placed some sculptures on the side counters as if they had been made by students from this art center, and of course some plants to decorate a little bit more the place. I also placed a pen holder as if Sims were going to use them to sign some papers, maybe to register to some art or music classes. Now I'm moving on to the hallway where you will find a door leading to the bathrooms, but this hallway will also lead you to the woodworking room. And I spent way more time than I thought I would on this hallway because in the art school this area was pretty much empty. But in The Sims I don't really like big empty spaces, so I tried to find what to put there, and in the end I went with a bench in the front of the bathrooms if some Sims want to wait for someone who's using the bathrooms, and of course once again some plants. Also for now there are 2 doors to the bathrooms, but eventually I will just make one big bathroom using the stalls that we got with university. And I tend to forget that we have them now in the game because at first I was going to do that little trick using the half walls that I have been doing since the half walls arrived in the game basically to make the bathroom stalls. But then I remembered that we now have real bathroom stalls in the game, so of course I'm going to use those. I also placed a little sitting area in front of the woodworking classroom door because once again I didn't want to have a big empty space. And I will put a dancer sculpture in this very awkward corner because I really didn't know what else to put there. But since the woodworking classroom was inspired by a pottery room, I thought that maybe that little dancer had been made by another student and in that class, and the school kept it to show off their students' talent. Now I'm just placing all of the lights, and I went with the ceiling lights that came with the fitness stuff bag that I placed in most of the build, and I also used the ceiling lights that came with the laundry day stuff bag, because these lights look a little bit industrial to me, and with the glass hallway having this metallic flooring and the walls being made of concrete and bricks, this build gave me some modern industrial vibes, so you will see me use a few items in this build that look industrial-like. So now I'm finally remembering that the bathroom stalls are a real thing in The Sims, and I'm changing the layout of the bathroom and the hallway a bit, and I will place 2 bathroom stalls here. I don't think more were needed, even though Sims tend to use the bathrooms a lot. When they travel somewhere, not everyone tends to use the bathrooms at the same time, thankfully, or at least that never happens to me. I also changed a bit the places for the windows because I didn't want for the bathroom stalls to cut into them, and I will use the sink that came with the Jungle Adventures because these reminded me a bit of the sinks that we had in the art school, and they also had this concrete look to them, although I also hesitated to use the ones that came with seasons, but these ones had cupboards underneath them, and I've never been anywhere where the sinks in the public bathrooms looked like the ones that you would have at home. Now, this floor mural will annoy me a couple times during the build because for an art center to be functional in the game, you need at least to have one mural either on the wall or on the ground, and I wanted to put both in this build, so I put one floor mural outside just in front of the entrance so that people know that they're getting into an art center, but I wanted to have another floor mural somewhere in the build because that was something that we had done when I was studying in the art school. We had done one wall and one floor mural, but eventually I will just get rid of it because there will just be no room for it in this build. Now I'm starting working on the classrooms, and at first I will be switching between all of the classes to put the items that I came across with and really wanted to use to make sure to use everything and not forget anything, but then I will come across that empty space upstairs, and at first I didn't really know what to do with it, and that's when I remembered that we had to use a bar in an art center, so that's where the bar ended up being, and I think it turned out pretty nice. So as you can see, I used the more industrial bar and bar stools, and of course that wasn't in the art school, by the way. But I will come back eventually to that area and change it a bit, and I think it will be when I will start working on the painting classroom. And now I'm moving on to the flower arranging classroom, and I will manage to fit in only 2 tables here, but once again, I think that's enough. There's already quite a lot to do on this lot, and of course I will decorate this room with a lot of flowers and also a lot of those Christmas decorations with flowers on them, as if they had been made by students. And I was imagining older Sims coming here maybe during the afternoon or early on in the evening to have their flower arranging classes, and I really imagined those classes would be very laid back and relaxed. And I will put an armchair as well that came with the movie hangout stuff back, maybe where someone could be knitting or something. And I will use a swatch with a lot of flowers on it, of course, because after all, this is the flower arranging classroom. Then I will be moving back to the roof because I wasn't sure if I wanted to leave the roof with this kind of half roof. At least that's how I call it in my head when I'm building. I actually don't know the real name of this roof type, I'm really sorry about that. And I'm actually going to change it for the normal roof type, kind of, and that was inspired by the vet clinic that I talked about earlier, to try and stay within the same architectural style, kind of, within the neighborhood, and I think it looks a little better this way. It looks a little bit more realistic to me, and I'm going to add those windows just to avoid the plain effect of the wallpaper and add a bit more depth to the build. And with just this small change, the build looks more complete to me. And now I'm just going to adjust the length of the eaves to the roof to add the effect that the glass hallway is actually coming out of the 2 buildings. And then I will be moving back inside and I will start working on the children's classroom, and in this room I will put 3 creativity tables and an easel, as if the easel was used by a teacher who would be showing off things to the children to try and attempt on their own, and basically just teach them the basics of drawing. And I will put the rug that came with City Living that looks like it's been used to avoid putting paint stain on the floor just underneath the creativity tables, as if it had been put there to protect the floor from the children's creativity and enthusiasm. And I will be using this rug in a lot of different places as well in this build, especially where I will be placing the wall mural to make it look like a work in progress, but also to make it look a little bit more realistic. And then on the wall, I will use some wall decorations, most of which came from the Parenthood game pack, I think. That looks like children's drawings, once again to make it look like the children have hung up what they have been working on the wall. Now I'm working on the music room, and I actually didn't spend that much time in this room. I just put a piano, a violin, a couple guitars, and a music production station that came with Get Famous. And I will be placing some music type paintings on the walls and a couple chairs. And I actually wasn't really inspired for this room. It's honestly just there because it has to be there for the art center to be functional. But when I started building this art center, I actually didn't really think about the music room. I thought more about the painting, woodworking, and flower arranging rooms than I did this one, but one thing I would advise you to do is try and stay as far away as possible from this room if you ever want to play in this build, because Sims are going to use every single instrument at the same time in this room. And most Sims aren't very good at playing instruments, so the noise that comes from this room is crazy. And then I'm moving on to the woodworking classroom, finally, and I will actually start with that little space at the back of the room, which is where I put the wall mural. And I actually tried to find another place in the build to put another wall mural, but the only walls that could have the mural had windows on them. And I guess it's not that big of a deal if there is paint on the windows. I just didn't want to put a mural on the windows, so this is the only place where there is a mural. And I tried to make it look like the other walls had been painted on as well, and as if it was just a free creative zone where everything was possible. And now I'm actually working on the woodworking area of this room, and I was really imagining a lot of noise coming from this room because of the wood being chopped and shaped. But you will see me actually put pots and pottery in this room because I didn't really see any woodwork of art, but now that I actually think of it, I could have gone into the debug menu and get some woodworking item from there. But I don't know, I just never think about using the debug menu. Oh well, next time. But yeah, I put those pots that I think came with Jungle Adventures because of what I actually wanted this room to be. A pottery room. And I put those newspapers on the ground because I thought that it was what could be used to clean the room more easily once the classes were done. And here I'm actually going back into the furnished rooms to put clocks in them, since they're supposed to be classrooms, and in classrooms you're supposed to know the time at which you're supposed to start and end the class. Now here I was trying to decorate a little bit the exterior and make it look a little bit more realistic, as if it was a place where a lot of people would be coming and maybe hanging out. And I used those trees that have been cut into kind of bubbles, and I also used the llama bush and another bush that looks like nothing like a bush, actually. I don't really know what it's supposed to look like, but since, you know, this place is supposed to be all about art and very artistic, well, you know, sometimes art is weird, so I thought that it was just the perfect place to use these items, so I did. And I've also put the guitar busking thing. I'm actually not sure of the name now, but you know that game with City Living, and it's used by Sims who can play the guitar to get tips in the city? I think it can also be used by Sims who can play the violin, and I thought it could work well in here, especially from that back entrance. And I actually didn't get all of the landscaping out, Well then, as you can see, nothing too exciting about the landscaping. It's pretty much the same thing that I always do when I landscape. I don't know, I just really struggled to find inspiration and to have the patience to create a good garden. I like building and decorating, but I don't want to spend 3 hours working on a garden. Maybe one day that will change, but for now, I just want to furnish and play the game. So now I'm moving on upstairs and I'm starting to work on the painting classroom, although I'm actually going to switch with the room across the hallway because it was a little bit more spacious, and I wanted to have a few easels in the same room, and I wanted to be able to put a mannequin in the middle as if someone was posing for the paintings. And I decided to use the easels that usually you unlock through the painting career because I actually never use those. I usually never place the items that you're supposed to unlock through the careers in my builds because a part of me feels like it's cheating, but I definitely should. One item though that you can unlock through a career, I think it's through the entertainer career in the musician branch. It's this very awesome stereo, not the jukebox, but the big old vintage stereo, and I really like that one. And that's probably the only item that I use without really feeling guilty. But for the easels, I usually just wait for my Sims to unlock them because these easels help with the painting skill quite a bit, and if I did use those from the beginning, it would definitely feel like cheating to me. So as you can see, I have put the podium in the middle, and I think it came with Get Famous. And I have put that mannequin as well in the middle, just on the podium, and it really reminded me of those classes we had with the people that posed for us. And these classes were actually really interesting when it came to play on the paper with the lights and the shadows, because we did use those lights that we could move just like the ones I have placed here. Not all the time, but sometimes we did use those, and it was really cool. I especially liked using charcoal. I think that's how it's called in English, I'm not so sure anymore. To make the shadows. It was really cool to use that medium. Although I didn't keep any of those drawings and I kind of regret it now. I would love to look back at those paintings and see how I've improved today, but oh well. So here I'm actually adding a few more details to that area that I'm actually going to redo almost entirely in just a few minutes, but then I will be moving on to the photo studio. And so here I'm moving on to the photography classroom, and the layout of this room is pretty much the same than the one for the woodworking classroom. So I start working on the little space at the back of the room that will be the photo studio, and I will use a lot of items that came with the Moschino stuff pack because I thought that those items would suit perfectly the aesthetic that I was going for that room. And I actually got that pack fairly recently, or maybe like a month ago now or something. I don't remember, but anyway, and I still haven't really explored everything with this pack, although I really like the bookshelf that came with this pack and the rug as well. These are the items that I've used, I think, the most of this pack so far. But when it comes to gameplay, the only time I actually tried that pack was at Lee and Henry's wedding. So maybe I'll be able to explore a bit more of this pack in this place with Henry. Because if you don't know, Henry is another sim from my Sims 4 series who's into photography. And of course, he's also Lee's husband. But now I'm working on the other area of this classroom, which is going to be the workspace per se. So technically in The Sims you cannot retouch or edit photos, but I wanted to have this space with the computers as if these were used to retouch the photos that had been taken out back, because that made this classroom look a bit more realistic to me. Although something that I could have placed too in this build is a dark room, but I didn't think about it then. I always do that. It's always when I'm editing or doing the voiceover that I start thinking of new things to place in the build, but oh well, maybe I'll work on a simple photo studio another day and I'll place a darkroom in that one. Also, I placed some magazines, fruits and stuff to eat on the counters because when you're working sometimes you need to eat, and maybe here some other students brought stuff to eat because they knew that they wouldn't be moving from these chairs much, and the magazines were here for inspirations for the Sims and the photos they could take or maybe how they could retouch them. And of course, I put some frames on the walls if Sims already took photos here, and once again the school wanted to show those photos off. And now I'm going back to the bar area and I'm going to change that space a lot because as I was working on the photography classroom, I kept thinking about the Sims that would have signed up for that class, and I imagined them being very healthy with their only sin being that they drank a lot of coffee. And so I thought that I could put a coffee machine somewhere in that photography room. But then I thought about the bar and that it was just the perfect place to get coffee from, just like a cafeteria of some kind. And that is when the layout of this room just changed completely, because when I placed the counters behind the bar, there was just not enough room for Sims to move around there. But I really liked the idea of the Sims having a space to hang out, so that room that had the floor mural became the lounge area, kind of, and I finally got rid of this mural that annoyed me all throughout this build. Also, as you probably saw, I decided to use the espresso machine that came with Get Together because it seemed more fancy to me than a simple coffee machine, and I thought that the photographers would be all about that, and I know that this is very stereotypical, but sometimes stereotypes can be fun. And here I'm working on the lounge room, and I decided to place a mini fridge and a microwave, and that is actually when I started thinking that Lee could be working here. And so this room became the room where you can take your break between classes and just chat and hang out, maybe all the teachers together, or maybe teachers and students together. I actually saw more teachers and students hanging out here together, to be honest, but I thought it was just a nice idea to have this private space to just relax. But we're getting towards the end of this video, so if you want to download this art center, you will find all of the information to do so in the description with a link to the online gallery, or you can look for it in-game using my origin ID, which is Majam11. But I really hope you liked this build. Let me know in the comments what you think. And I really hope that you enjoyed this video and that you will enjoy the rest of this video, and I will talk to you in the next one.